Hi, I'm Mike Beliveau, and I am a gripaholic. Now, I am rarely satisfied with the production grips that come on a gun from the factory. In fact, I have to be honest, I'm rarely satisfied with just one set of grips for any particular gun. And I might be a little unusual in that, but I do have an excuse. Since I have to photograph guns for a lot of different situations, for videos, magazine articles, that sort of thing. Grips are the easiest thing to change that will really change the whole look of a gun. So by having multiple grips for the same gun, it saves me from having to buy multiple guns for different photographic purposes. But really, that's just an excuse for my addiction. I do love grips. And previously, I did a video on stag grips, and I thought it was about time to follow it up with one on ivory grips. And with the stag, I just stuck with natural stag, but with ivory, you really can't do that because of the legal situation surrounding ivory grips. So for this video, I'm going to be discussing genuine ivory grips, and I'm going to be discussing the substitutes that are available to give you the look of ivory grips when ivory grips are really no longer available to most of us. Now, elephant ivory grips, grips made from the actual tusks of elephants, has always been the gold standard for handgun grips. The material is dense, it's easily worked, it can be shaped and carved like wood. It takes scrim sanding very well. It can be engraved, it can be inked, and the ink doesn't bleed. And it just feels great in your hand and it looks great. Nothing looks like ivory, and to be honest with you, nothing really feels like ivory in your hand. Real ivory grip has a little bit of tack to it, even highly polished. So it's not real slippery in your hand. It's just the best grip material out there. Unfortunately, it's rarely available these days. Personally, I have 3 guns that have ivory grips on them. I used to have more. I traded a few of them off. And, sometimes when I talk about that, I get bombarded by conservation activists telling me what an awful person I am for having them. And to be honest with you, I just don't see it that way. I acquired all of those grips about 20 years ago or more, when it was quite legal to have them, and they were all made by legally sourced pre-ban ivory. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to argue the morality or the efficacy of the bans on ivory. I'll just talk about them. And I'm not going to comment on whether or not they have achieved the actual goals that they were established to achieve, because none of that matters. The fact is that these bans are the law, and as such, we're just going to have to live with them. That's just the way it is. And it doesn't matter if they've done the job or not, or if they even make sense or not, or if they have even been beneficial to some of the countries in Africa that have elephant populations. So I'm not going to discuss any of that stuff. I'm just going to talk about the grips themselves. But I will tell you about the ban because it really tells you why you can't get grips right now. Ivory poaching was and is still, by the way, a problem. In an effort to stop the international trade in ivory, in 1989, the international trade in ivory was banned. So that meant basically here in the United States, if you were a law-abiding citizen, which most of us are, you couldn't get ivory imported into the country after 1989. However, ivory that was already in the country at the time was grandfathered, and it was known as pre-ban ivory. And what a lot of grip manufacturers who made ivory grips did was travel the country looking for tusks that had been harvested before the ban went into place. And, they usually came out of the collections of fairly well-to-do African safari hunters who had taken their elephant and had the tusks as a trophy, and in the fullness of time passed away, and their estates were coming on the market, and those tusks would get bought by grip makers. So we could still get ivory grips without killing any new elephants. But that was considered not stringent enough, because you could still get ivory, so it's hard to tell a tusk harvested prior from 1989 to one harvested after 1989. So the federal government made it illegal to buy and transport ivory across state lines. And that was done about 2014, I think, if I remember correctly. And of course, that killed the ivory grip business here in America. There are still a few guys that make ivory grips, but if you want to buy one, you have to travel to their state and purchase it from them there and take possession of it from them there. They can't mail it to you. There's no interstate trade in ivory. Even the trade in antique ivory, if you've got grips on a gun, and this is going to be very convoluted because these laws are complex and hard to understand. But as long as the cost or value of the ivory grips are an insubstantial portion of the cost of the gun, then you can own a gun with antique ivory grips, and you can trade it and you can ship it, across state lines. However, if the ivory grips are a principal portion of the value of the gun, you can't do that even if it's 200 years old. What that means is if you come across, let's say, an Uberti single action army that has a set of pre-ban ivory grips on it that someone out of state is trying to sell, you cannot legally buy that because the grips are worth about 3 times as much as the gun right now. Because, of course, like all prohibitions, it drove a lot of the market underground, and it made any items that could be traded much more expensive than they were before. So if you've got an antique Colt, say a first-generation Colt, that has ivory grips on it, those grips are going to be about 1/3 of the value of the gun, and theoretically you could trade that. Now, as far as I know, no one has been arrested for selling a gun with antique ivory grips on it, regardless of its value. Now, I may have missed a case, but the fact is nobody wants to be a test case. So, practically speaking, new ivory grips really can't be had unless you happen to have a grip maker in your state, or you're willing to do some extensive traveling to find them. So that makes it a little bit tough. And I said I wasn't going to talk about the morality or the efficacy of this, and I'm just going to say one thing. Back in the Roaring 20s, we made the production and sale of alcohol in this country illegal. And yet, people still got drunk. Very drunk. Lots of people. Congressmen, presidents even. That's how prohibitions happen. Of course, the result was that many legal brewers and distillers went out of business, never to be seen again. And people like Al Capone became wealthy. And that's also what prohibition does. So welcome to the ivory prohibition. But because we have an ivory prohibition, and because most of us are law-abiding citizens, it means that we've had to turn to substitutes for ivory for new grips. And I'm going to talk about those substitutes now. There are basically 2 categories. There are the natural substitutes, and then there are the synthetic substitutes. So let's start off with the natural substitutes. first would be the other tusks, shall we say, of sufficient size to make gun grips. And you would find them on walruses, on narwhals, and on hippos. Now, hippo ivory, as far as I know, is not banned for importation into the United States. It's banned in Great Britain, it's banned in a number of other countries, but it's not banned everywhere. It's not banned here. But you don't find any grip makers that are interested in it. At least I haven't. But if you can get yourself a tusk, you can probably find a custom grip maker who will make you grips out of it. Now, it's funny, one of my heroes, boyhood heroes, Frederick Russell Burnham, who, by the way, I'm an Eagle Scout, and he was the model that Baden-Powell used for scouting. He was an American. He cut his teeth scouting in Arizona against the Apache, and then eventually he moved to Africa, where he was a scout in the Metabile Wars and in the Boer War for the British government. And Lord Baden-Powell, who was a soldier, British soldier there at the time, was incredibly impressed by Burnham. And he used him as the model for Boy Scouts. And Burnham's just fascinating. He's someone, if you're not familiar with him, you should get familiar with him. He is a very interesting character. Now, Burnham had, for his revolver, an 1875 Remington in .44-40. And in Africa, he had that stocked in hippo ivory. And my 1875 was the first handgun that I had stocked in ivory, though mine stocked in elephant ivory. And I did that basically to replicate Burnham's gun as close as I could. And I've had others, as I've said, stocked in ivory since then, but that was my first, and it got me hooked on ivory. So hippo ivory is still an alternative, at least for now. I'm sure eventually we'll ban it because we're crazy. Most of it seems to go to China and Japan these days, and like I say, I've not seen any grip makers working in it here, but if you can get a hold of one, you can probably find somebody to make one. The next area would be walrus tusk and narwhals. I don't know that narwhals make a wide enough horn, basically. It's not a tusk, it's a horn, to make gun grips, but walrus do. Now, the problem with, and also whale teeth, by the way, but the problem with all three of those, walrus tusk, narwhal, and whale teeth, is that they are covered by the 1972 Marine Species Act. Now, the 1972 Marine Species Act prohibits Americans from hunting or trading in certain marine species like whales, walruses, and narwhals, and from trading in their products. The only exception to that is indigenous subsistence hunters are allowed to do that. In other words, Alaskan Indians or Alaskan Eskimos, right? Basically Alaskan natives who are subsistence hunters can do it. Now, my understanding there are a couple of Alaskan hunters who will make gun grips, but I don't know who they are. I mean, if you can find them, you can legally get them to make you a set of grips and buy them from wherever you are and have them shipped to you. But you're probably not going to do that because, like I say, I don't know who they are. And this is going to be quite a pain to get it done. But it is possible. So the next natural substitute is mammoth ivory. That's right, I'm talking about woolly mammoths. Now, the fact that the most widely available ivory on the planet, legally these days, comes from an animal that went extinct at least 4,000 years ago. And the bulk of them were believed to be extinct about 10,000 or 12,000 years ago. The fact that that's the most widely available legal ivory on the planet is amazing. Most mammoth ivory comes from either Siberia or from Alaska, or from Canada. In fact, more certainly from Canada, because woolly mammoths died and were flash frozen in the Arctic tundra, and they were preserved, for 10, 20, 50,000 years sometimes. And their tusks are still harvestable, and they are not considered out of bounds by conservationists because nobody is killing any current mammoths. Though if some of these cloning companies have their way, we may have mammoths back again, which would be interesting. I'm not going to lie. But anyway, woolly mammoth ivory is the most commonly available legal ivory on the planet right now. Now, the problem with mammoth ivory is, as you might guess, it might be 50,000 years old. I mean, think about that. That the material on your gun grip was walking around 50,000 years ago. Now, some mammoth ivory is beautiful, creamy ivory, just like today's elephant ivory. But most of it is not. And the reason for that is because it has been sitting buried in permafrost for 50,000 years. So a lot of it is mineral stained. A lot of it's kind of rough. Some of it is actually fossilized. And by fossilized, I mean the organic material has been leached away and replaced by mineral material, right? Just like petrified wood. So that can be a little bit suboptimal. Now, mammoth ivory has a lot of its proponents, and some guys like the rougher look or the mineral stain look. But if you're trying to replicate elephant ivory, you need some really prime mammoth ivory. But it's available, and it is legal. So there you go. Now, the next whole category of natural substitutes are bones. Particularly the long leg bones of several animals. American bison. I've not seen buffalo, as in water buffalo, the buffalo they have on other continents. But certainly American bison, domestic cow, and giraffe bone. And I'm not sure why the conservationists have not gone after us for giraffe bone yet. I'm sure they will. But right now, giraffe bone is the prime. Some bone, like bison bone, can be very good, or it cannot be. Some bone is porous. Some bone takes mineral inclusions easier than others, so it gets stained. But bison bone can be quite good. Giraffe bone typically is like the gold standard of bone right now. It can be very beautiful and very much like ivory, or it can get a little funky looking. I mean, it can have lines, striations, mineral marks in it. So, I mean, my recommendation is, if you're getting giraffe bone grips, ask to see the material first, or get a picture of the material, or really specify what you're looking for in material. If you want it to be very ivory-like, you should say that to the supplier, to the grip maker, and they will undoubtedly accommodate you. Now, I only have one set of grips in giraffe bone at the moment, and that's on my Colt Trooper 357 Magnum. And this is a vintage Colt. I have to say the giraffe bone grips look excellent. My set of grips came from Rogers Guns Grips, and they're really good. Now I bought them on eBay. I was able to see the exact grips that I wanted to buy. I was able to contact the seller and say, hey, I want those grips. Don't substitute anything else. Or if you still have those available, because sometimes they'll just put up a generic picture and sell, whatever they have at the moment, which is nothing wrong with that. But you should just know it's possible. And I have to say, they were excellent as far as contacting me and working with me, and I got the exact grips I wanted. And they are beautiful, which I think you'll agree. They're just beautiful grips. Now, in the future, I'll probably get a set for a single action army. And I'll probably go to Nutmeg Sports in Connecticut for that. Nutmeg Sports is the company that made all of my ivory grips. And they do great work. And of course, the ban in interstate trade in ivory put them out of the ivory business. But they rebounded doing giraffe grips. And they make some beautiful grips. And I'll probably be contacting them in a little while and telling them what I want. And they can scrimshand them for you. They can carve them. They can do a lot of good stuff. So whatever you're interested in, if you want it in giraffe and you want a really set of custom grips, I would definitely go to them. But I would not hesitate if I saw something that I wanted at Rogers Guns Grips to work with them again, because they were also excellent. So those are the natural substitutes for ivory that are available. And they're all kind of pricey. I'm not going to lie to you. You know, I mean, I spent more on the giraffe grips than I spent on actual ivory grips 20 years ago. Now, I know there's been a lot of inflation since then and should not be surprised. But they're expensive. And because of the bans and the rarity and the difficulty of working with all of this stuff, it's made the prices of natural grip materials go up. That's what Prohibition does. You know, you couldn't, during the Roaring 20s, you couldn't buy a bottle of Seagram 7 for the same price that you bought it for in 1917. Right? That's just not happening. So, if you're going to use any of the natural substitutes, you're going to pay. That's just the way it is. Now, 1911 grips, by the way, are probably the least expensive of all of the natural grip material models. And the reason for that is pretty obvious. It takes a lot bigger bone or tusk to make a single action revolver grip than it does to make a 1911 grip scale. So if you want to get your 1911 done, they'll cost you about $200 to get a good giraffe grip. You know, not that terrible. So just bear that in mind. But a lot of us who don't have that kind of money to spend are going to go to the synthetic materials for grips. And they're going to be more like in the $100, $150 range. So, you know, they are not inconsequential in price, but given cost of things these days, not out of the ballpark. So, you know, natural elephant ivory, which I say is a gold standard, it has a visible grain in it, kind of like wood has a grain in it, because it's a tooth that grows over time, right? So it's going to have grain lines in it, and they give the ivory a beautiful look. It's not just flat white. Natural ivory is very dense, polishes well. It's got a lot of good characteristics. As I said, scrimshands well. So that's the standard that we're trying to come up to in the substitutes, the synthetic substitutes, and some of them reach it and some of them do not. Now, most of the substitutes are going to be labeled as poly-ivory. And poly-ivory is a nice way of saying plastic. But poly-ivory sounds so much cooler than plastic, which sounds, you know, kind of déclassé, right? But that's what it is. So long chain polymer, that's what the poly is. But not all synthetic substitutes are poly-ivory. And the one that I happen to like quite a bit is called Micarta. And you'll be familiar with that if you're familiar with custom knives, because a lot of custom knife grips are made out of micarta. Micarta is made by layering a substrate material like paper, linen, burlap. Generally, it's going to be a paper or a cloth. Layering that with layers of resin and then curing it under heat to turn into a solid block of material. And basically, if you think of micarta as like building a lasagna, right, where you got the noodles and the sauce and the cheese and the noodles and the sauce and the cheese, so on and so forth, and then you bake it and it becomes a delicious dish. Well, same thing with micarta, except the layers are, say, paper or linen, and resin, paper or linen, and resin, get as much as you want. Then you bake it and you come up with a solid material. Micarta is a very desirable grip material because it's impervious to solvents, which is not the case with all poly-ivories. And even with ivory, it's real ivory. It's a good idea to keep solvents off of it. But micarta says, ha, I laugh at your solvents. So it's a very tough material. It's very durable. It's very hard. It's dense. It's got a good feel in your hand. And depending on the substrate, it can have a more or less prominent grain pattern. Now, I've used Brownell's micarta. I've used their single action grips, which are sold way oversized so you can fit them to anything. They're a paper substrate micarta, and the grain is very delicate. So you got to look really closely to see it, but it's there. And it works up well, and I've got it on one of my 1851 navies, and I like them very much. And you can find micarta from other sources that'll have different characteristics. So I recommend it. It works like ivory or like wood. It's pretty easy to work with. Now, it's not as cheap as some other materials, so it will go you well over $100 usually for micarta grips. You can get the blanks for a bit less if you can make your own, which if you're talented, no reason you can't. But good material. Okay, so that gets us into the poly-ivories. Now, not too surprisingly, with poly-ivories, not all poly-ivories are created equal. Some are definitely better than others. I'm going to go over just a few makers of poly-ivory grips. There are more out there. Some are good, some are not, but these are ones that I use the most often and that I like. And I'll tell you why with each one. So the first one's going to be Altamont. Now, as you probably know, Altamont makes grips for a lot of different guns, and they make like factory and aftermarket grips for Rugers and for Colts. But they make them for a lot of other guns as well. They have a product called bonded ivory. And this has ivory dust, basically, mixed with the plastic resin. The result does not look exactly like natural ivory because dust is not going to give you grain patterns or anything. However, it's a very dense material. So it works well. It's not very porous. It looks very good. It's heavy. It's hard. Just what you want. And you can make a nice grip from it. And Altamont does a really good job. And if you have a second or third generation Colt, these are a great choice because they'll fit them pretty well. And it's easy to get a really good fit with Altamonts on those. Now, they're going to fit on some clones, and some they will not, because the grip frames vary quite a bit with clones, so you might be taking a chance on that. As opposed to, say, Hogue, that makes them so oversized they'll fit on anything, but you have to really know how to fit a set of grips, in that case, to use them. So Altamont makes their ivory grips in two versions, basically plain bonded ivory, and you can get them with the Colt medallions or without the Colt medallions, however you want them. And they make an aged ivory as well that has, crack appearances in it, that sort of thing. They're both good. The material's the same. It's just whatever your visual tastes like. So I think they're one of the best. Now, if you don't have Colts, I would recommend Arizona Custom Gun Grips. Their product is called Magna Tusk, which I find quite humorous because for years I used to call the poly-ivory stuff Naugatusks, that it was the the teeth of the same animal from which we get naugahyde for furniture. But there's this magna tusks. And it comes in a whole variety of looks, from white to aged to stag type looks. It's an excellent material, very hard, very durable. You can get a really good grip fit for most Italian guns, which is important. I'm going to show you some on an 1858 Remington, but I have them in a stag type look on a Colt single action. Same material, it's just routed and painted to look like stag. And it's very good. So you can get these for your Great Westerns, for your Piettas, your Ubertis, or for Colts. They have them for Remingtons. They have them for 1851s. They have them for 1860s. They've got them for single action armies. They've got a wide selection of very good stuff. So Arizona Custom Gun Grips, I heartily recommend them. I think they make, I would say, if you want quality and you want some different stuff, this is probably the number one choice. Now, the last grip maker I'm going to cover is Buffalo Brothers Cowboy Store grips. And I've been using these for ages. The material is not as good as Altamont's material or Arizona Custom Gun Grips material. It's lighter. It's a little more porous. So you might say, well, Mike, why do you like it? Well, I like it because it comes molded in shapes that original gun grips were carved in. So you can get grips with steers heads on them. You can get grips with Liberty Eagles on them. Those are the ones that I most have. With Liberty caps. They have a whole variety. And you can get them in a whole range of looks, from stark white to ivory to light to heavy antiquing. You can get them inked, like scrimshawed, or not, just plain white. Do what you will with them. So they're pretty versatile, and I've used them on quite a few guns because it gives you the look of those old-time carved grips. And they make a really good grip. I mean, it may not be the best material you can get your hands on, but it's good. And you can make a really fine set of grips out of it. So I really recommend them. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention is not a grip maker, but a grip material. And this is called Resin Ivory, and it's sold by Guitar Parts. The beauty of these is that this material is as close to real ivory as you can get in a synthetic. It's phenomenal. It's got grain lines in it. It even has Schrader lines, which if you ever want to know if something is real ivory or not, look at the bottom of the grip, the base of the grip. And if there are these little herringbone lines in it, and they can be really hard to see if the grip is highly polished, and a lot of lines are going to be very fine. But grab a loop and take a look. If it's got those herringbone lines, it's real ivory. And this is the only substitute I know that has Schrader lines in it. This is it. So they've really gone out of their way. It's very dense. It can be cut and worked just like real ivory. It can be engraved, inked, scrimshanded, carved. It is quite nice. But they don't make grips. Now, I have a couple of blanks of this. And I don't know if I'm going to make a set of grips myself. I may send them to a custom grip maker and have grips made with some scrimshanding done on them. But I'm going to do something with this. But I'm very impressed with the material. So the company is Guitar Parts and More. And it's Resin Ivory. And as the name implies, they mostly sell guitar parts, but they also sell gun grip blanks. You can find it on their website. And if you're willing to go to the trouble of either making grips or having grips made, this is the poly-ivory to get your hands on. So that's a look at everything that's available in ivory or its substitutes. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it does you some good. If you're looking to have ivory type grips in your future, I hope this has informed you so that you can make your choice. And if you liked it, you know what to do. Thumbs up, right? Share it, make a comment, do all that good stuff. Play with the algorithm. And until next time, bye.